So where we're up to in terms of Pythagoras' theorem, we should be able to comfortably identify the hypotenuse as well as the two shorter sides. We should know the difference between surd form and decimal form. So what we're going to move on to is manipulating the formula that we already know, so c squared equals a squared plus b squared, and manipulate it to find the shorter side. So we're going to go back to our work on equations a little bit, and we're going to actually get a squared on its own to give us the formula to find the shorter side. Now generally you can do this with any formula. Okay, this is called rearranging the formula. Now I want to get a squared on its own. Now the way I need to do that is by getting rid of the b squared from this side. How do I do that? Like you would any other term. You've got plus b squared, so the opposite of that is minus b squared. What you do to one side, you do to the other. Now let's rewrite that out. So I've got c squared minus b squared equals a squared. Now the easy way to view that is a squared equals c squared minus b squared. And that's our formula to find the shorter side. C squared, or the hypotenuse squared, minus the shorter side squared. Now let's put that into practice. Let's have a look at these two triangles. Now, I'll put in the 90-degree angle sign. So we know that this is the hypotenuse. So this is going to be our C. Therefore, this has to be our B. So let's start subbing these into our equation. So a squared, because we don't know what this is, okay, because that's going to be a. So a squared equals 10 squared minus 6 squared, okay, with the 10 subbing in for the C and the 6 subbing in for the B. Now let's break that down. So 100 minus 36. Now you can actually do that in one step. Okay, I'm just breaking it down in case you kind of get a bit confused as to what I'm doing. So 100 minus 36, that is 64. Now remember, we don't want this squared. Okay, this is very similar to quadratic equations. So let's square root that, and if I square root one side, I have to square root the other. So I've got a on its own equals the square root of 64, which is 8. Now remember, if the question asks you for surd form, you would just give it as square root 64. That would be your answer. If it is in decimal form, okay, or numerical form, you would, okay, provide the actual number. So you would break down the surd into the actual number it is. Let's have a look at another example. Okay, again, let's label. So opposite this, okay, so this is obviously C. Therefore, this has to be B, and this is A, okay, that I don't know about. Now, A squared equals, okay, 43 squared minus 38 squared. Now let's do that in one step in our calculator. So 43 squared minus 38 squared. So 405. Now let's square root that and square root that. A equals, so 405. Now I'm going to round it to 2 decimal places, okay, because generally speaking that is what we do, unless the question specifies otherwise. So looking at the 4, okay, because I'm looking at my third decimal spot, okay, I want to round it to 2 decimal places. So I look at the third, I ask myself, is that 5 or more? No, that's not. So I can leave the 2 the way it is. So the answer is 20.12. Remember, if the question is saying surd form, you leave it as this. Okay, square root 405. If the question is asking to round it to 2 decimal places or give it in decimal form, you break that down and you would provide 20.12. Okay, you've got to read what the question is asking.